Fix it in 30 seconds, and I will pay you $5 million. The words echoed through the grand ballroom of the Langford Crown Hotel in downtown Seattle with the effortless confidence of a man who had spent his entire life believing every problem could be solved by the people standing below him. Beneath towering crystal chandeliers, hundreds of investors, executives, and technology reporters gathered around a demonstration stage where Apex Meridian was preparing to unveil the most advanced autonomous delivery robot the company had ever built. Every spotlight pointed toward the sleek machine resting silently in the middle of the platform. Every camera waited for a flawless presentation. Every second of silence cost more than most people would earn in a lifetime. Grant Holloway, the white billionaire founder and chief executive officer of Apex Meridian, stood beside the motionless robot wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit and the unmistakable expression of a man who had never walked into a room without owning it. Behind him, enormous digital screens flashed the company logo while engineers hurried across the stage, whispering to one another as they searched for a solution that refused to appear. The robot remained frozen. The demonstration timer had already been delayed twice. Several representatives from the nation's largest logistics companies exchanged uneasy looks. One investor quietly checked his watch. Another slowly closed the folder containing what could have become the largest partnership in Apex Meridian's history. A single failed demonstration threatened to unravel months of negotiations. A few yards away, Maya Reynolds moved quietly between tables carrying a silver tray filled with sparkling water and coffee cups. At 29 years old, the black waitress had spent the evening doing exactly what exceptional service required. She noticed everything while allowing herself to be noticed by almost no one. She replaced empty glasses before guests asked. She stepped around expensive conversations without interrupting them. She listened because listening had always taught her more than speaking. As she passed the demonstration platform, her eyes drifted toward one corner of the diagnostic screen. A tiny line of system information blinked twice before disappearing again. She slowed for only a heartbeat. Then she whispered almost to herself, "They are checking the wrong module." The sentence was so quiet that it should have vanished beneath the music and conversation. Instead, Grant Holloway heard it. He turned toward the waitress with a faint smile that carried more amusement than curiosity. Around him, several executives looked in the same direction. Victor Hale, Apex Meridian's director of engineering, folded his arms with obvious disbelief. "Did you say something?" Grant asked. Maya met his eyes without the slightest trace of fear. "The robot is not failing because of the drive system," she answered calmly. "It is following conflicting navigation instructions." A few engineers exchanged puzzled glances. Victor shook his head almost immediately. "That is impossible," he replied. "You cannot know that from here." Grant's smile widened. "Well," he said loudly enough for the surrounding guests to hear, "if you believe you can do better than my entire engineering team, fix it in 30 seconds, and I will pay you $5 million. Laughter rolled through the ballroom. Someone near the front quietly applauded the joke. Several phones rose into the air, already recording what everyone expected would become an embarrassing moment. Maya slowly placed her serving tray on a nearby table without taking her eyes off the stage. She looked at the frozen robot once more, then back at Grant. Her voice never changed. "Have your legal team write down the promise," she said. "Then start the clock." In an instant, the laughter disappeared, and for the first time that evening, the most powerful people in the room stopped looking at a waitress and started wondering why she sounded like someone who had already seen the answer. The ballroom remained so quiet that even the soft hum of the air conditioning suddenly sounded louder than the conversations that had filled the room only moments before. No one laughed anymore. The phones that had been raised to capture a waitress embarrassing herself continued recording for an entirely different reason. People were no longer waiting for a joke. They were waiting to discover whether confidence like hers came from courage or knowledge. Grant Holloway studied Maya Reynolds with a look that slowly shifted from amusement to curiosity. During decades of negotiating billion-dollar acquisitions, he had learned to recognize confidence, but this felt different. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was behaving as though the outcome had already been decided somewhere inside her mind. Victor Hale stepped between Maya and the demonstration platform with the protective instinct of a man guarding years of professional reputation. "This area is restricted," he said firmly. "You have absolutely no authorization to touch company equipment." Maya nodded politely without taking another step forward. "I have not asked to touch anything," she answered. "I only need to see the live diagnostics." Victor gave a dismissive smile. "You would not understand what you are looking at." Several guests quietly nodded in agreement. To them, she was still a waitress wearing a neatly pressed black apron, comfortable shoes, and a silver name tag that simply read Maya. Her appearance fit every expectation they carried into the ballroom, and expectations often speak louder than facts. Grant slowly folded his arms. "Show her the screen," he said. Victor hesitated. "Sir, this is unnecessary. Either she proves herself wrong, or we all enjoy an interesting story tomorrow morning," Grant replied with calm confidence. "Let her look." Victor reluctantly signaled one of the engineers to rotate the diagnostic monitor toward Maya without granting her access to the controls. The colorful stream of system data filled the display with charts, coordinates, sensor readings, and navigation values updating every fraction of a second. Maya looked at the screen in complete silence. She did not scan every number. She ignored most of the graphs entirely. Instead, her eyes settled on two small columns near the bottom corner of the display. Less than 5 seconds passed before she quietly asked, "When was navigation package 12 installed?" The engineer standing beside the monitor blinked in surprise. "Yesterday afternoon," he answered before realizing he probably should not have responded. Maya nodded once. "That explains it." Victor immediately shook his head. "No, it does not explain anything." Maya looked directly at him. "The robot is receiving 2 different directional references at the same time. The drive system is doing exactly what it was instructed to do. Your software believes 2 starting positions are both correct." A young systems engineer named Owen Price stared at the monitor, then back at Maya. He quickly enlarged one section of the diagnostic display. His expression changed almost immediately. "Victor," he said carefully, "the navigation references really are conflicting." Victor answered without even looking. "The sensors recalibrate automatically." Maya gently shook her head. "Only if the calibration values agree with each other." Another uncomfortable silence settled across the ballroom. Grant noticed several members of his engineering team quietly examining the same section Maya had identified within seconds. Their conversations became faster. Their faces became more serious. Nobody had expected a waitress to point them toward the exact location of the problem before anyone on the team had recognized it themselves. Grant looked toward the legal counsel standing near the front row. "Prepare the agreement," he said without taking his eyes off Maya. "If she succeeds, every word of my promise will be honored." Around the ballroom, dozens of investors exchanged uncertain glances. They had arrived expecting to evaluate a revolutionary machine. Instead, they found themselves witnessing something far more unusual. The person everyone had overlooked was becoming the only one in the room who appeared completely certain about what would happen next. Maya Reynolds did not move toward the stage immediately. Instead, she stood perfectly still beside the polished oak table where she had placed her serving tray, allowing the growing silence to work in her favor. People often believe that the loudest voice controlled the room, but experience had taught her something entirely different. The person who understood the problem usually owned the next conversation. Grant Holloway watched her with increasing interest while attorneys quietly drafted a one-page agreement confirming the promise that had begun as a challenge and was rapidly becoming a legal commitment. Across the ballroom, Investors who had been preparing to leave slowly returned to their seats. Technology reporters adjusted their cameras. Every engineer on the Apex Meridian team stared at the diagnostic display, searching for the mistake that Maya had identified within seconds. Victor Hale refused to surrender his confidence. He pointed toward the navigation data and spoke with the certainty of someone determined to defend years of authority. The software has already compensated for those values. They cannot be responsible for the failure. Maya looked at the screen once more before answering. Compensation only works when both reference systems agree on where the robot begins. Yours do not. Owen Price enlarged another section of the live diagnostics, comparing the incoming sensor information with the navigation package installed the previous afternoon. His eyebrows slowly lifted. The location offsets are being calculated twice, he said quietly. Another engineer leaned closer. That should not happen. Maya gave a small nod. It should not happen. But it is happening. Grant noticed something he had not expected. Nobody on his engineering team dismissed her explanation anymore. They were no longer arguing because she was a waitress. They were arguing because they had begun testing whether she was right. That difference mattered. It was the first crack in the wall of assumptions that had surrounded her from the moment she entered the ballroom wearing a black apron and carrying a tray instead of a laptop. Grant walked a few steps closer. Tell me something, he said. How did you recognize the problem from across the room? Maya answered without hesitation. Because the robot did not hesitate randomly. It paused at the exact moment conflicting navigation commands reached the controller. Machines repeat patterns. People often mistake patterns for accidents. Several investors exchanged surprised looks. The explanation required no complicated technical language, yet everyone understood it. Even guests with no engineering background could suddenly picture the robot trying to obey two opposite directions at the same time. Victor folded his arms more tightly. That is still only a theory. Maya calmly met his gaze. Then let me test it. Grant looked toward his legal counsel, who handed him the completed agreement. Without reading it twice, Grant signed his name across the bottom and slid the document toward Maya. If you solve the problem under the conditions we agreed upon, the payment will be made exactly as promised. Maya read every line before signing beneath his signature. She handed the agreement back without smiling. For her, the paper was never about the money. It was about making certain that respect could not disappear as easily as spoken words. Owen looked at the countdown system connected to the demonstration stage. Everything is ready, he announced. The large digital timer illuminated above the platform, waiting for someone to begin. Around the ballroom, conversations disappeared completely. Crystal glasses rested untouched on linen-covered tables. Camera lenses focused on the woman everyone had overlooked less than 10 minutes earlier. Maya took one slow breath, adjusted the apron tied neatly around her waist, and walked toward the silent robot with the steady confidence of someone who was not trying to prove she belonged there, because she had known that truth long before anyone else in the room was willing to see it. The moment Maya stepped onto the demonstration platform, the ballroom seemed to shrink around her. Hundreds of eyes followed every movement, yet she never looked toward the audience. She looked only at the silent robot waiting beneath the bright stage lights. The machine did not know who was rich, who held executive titles, or who wore an apron instead of a business suit. It only responded to facts, and facts had always been easier to understand than pride. Grant Holloway remained near the front of the stage with his hands folded, studying Maya more carefully than he had ever studied the robot that carried his company's reputation. For the first time that evening, he realized he knew absolutely nothing about the woman standing a few feet away. He knew the logo on his company headquarters. He knew the market value of Apex Meridian to the nearest dollar. He knew the names of every major investor sitting in the ballroom. Yet he did not know why a waitress seemed more comfortable around his technology than many of the engineers who had helped build it. Victor Hale walked toward the control console before stopping beside Owen Price. His voice remained steady, but the confidence behind it had begun to fade. Do not give her direct access to the source code, he instructed. She only gets the diagnostic interface. Maya heard every word and answered before Owen could respond. I do not need the source code. She gently placed both hands behind her back. If I need to rewrite your software, the problem is much larger than everyone here believes. Owen looked toward Grant, who nodded once. Give her diagnostic access only, Grant said. Nothing more. Owen activated a temporary guest profile and rotated the touchscreen toward Maya. A countdown clock appeared on the giant display above the stage, but it had not started yet. Maya leaned forward slightly, reading the diagnostic information with complete concentration. She ignored the colorful charts designed to impress investors. She skipped the animated graphics highlighting battery performance and processing speed. Instead, she focused on a narrow list of calibration values buried beneath several technical menus. Her eyes moved slowly from one number to another, then stopped. Interesting, she whispered. Victor crossed his arms. What exactly is interesting? Maya pointed toward two nearly identical calibration entries. These values should mirror each other. They do not. Victor answered immediately. Those numbers are generated automatically. Maya nodded. Exactly. Which means someone trusted the automation without verifying the result. Owen enlarged the section she indicated and compared it with the archive configuration from the previous software version. His expression changed. The left sensor correction is positive, he said quietly. The previous version used a negative value. Victor quickly stepped closer. That difference is intentional. Maya calmly looked at him. Then why is the navigation controller trying to cancel its own correction every time the robot starts moving? No one answered. Even the reporters standing near the stage lowered their cameras for a moment as engineers began whispering among themselves. Grant watched the discussion unfold without interrupting. Leadership had taught him that there were moments when speaking too quickly only delayed the truth. The room no longer felt divided between executives and service staff. It had become divided between those who understood the machine and those who only believed they did. Maya straightened her posture and looked toward the large countdown display suspended above the stage. I know where the problem is, she said with quiet certainty. Whether I can prove it depends on whether you are willing to let the clock begin. Grant held her gaze for several long seconds before turning toward the event coordinator. Start the timer, he said. Let the demonstration continue. As the enormous digital numbers illuminated above the stage and began counting backward from 30, every conversation vanished, every camera focused forward, and the future of Apex Meridian suddenly rested in the steady hands of the woman everyone had mistaken for someone who was only there to serve dinner. The glowing numbers above the stage began their steady descent. 30, 29, 28. No dramatic music filled the ballroom. No one dared to whisper. The only sound came from the soft ticking of the digital countdown and the quiet breathing of hundreds of people who suddenly realized they were witnessing something none of them had expected. Maya Reynolds rested one hand lightly beside the diagnostic console without touching a single control. She studied the data one final time, allowing the information to confirm what instinct had already told her. Machines were honest. They never lied about what they were doing. They only required someone patient enough to listen. Grant Holloway watched every movement without interrupting. His confidence had not disappeared, but it had changed shape. A few minutes earlier, he had been certain the challenge would expose a waitress who had spoken out of turn. Now he found himself wondering whether his own company had overlooked something obvious, because everyone had been searching for a complicated answer to a very simple problem. Victor Hale stood only a few feet away, his jaw tightening as the seconds continued to disappear. 24. Owen Price quietly announced, as if reading the clock aloud somehow made the moment easier to understand. Maya finally reached toward the touchscreen. Instead of opening the primary control system, she selected a small maintenance menu hidden beneath several layers of diagnostic options. Several engineers leaned forward. One reporter quietly zoomed his camera closer to capture every movement of her fingertips. Maya opened the calibration history rather than the current settings. Grant noticed the decision immediately. She was not asking what the robot believed now. She was asking when it had first begun believing something different. 20. Maya compared two software records side by side. One had been saved 48 hours earlier during the final rehearsal. The other had been installed the previous afternoon after a routine update. Her eyes stopped on a single value that almost nobody else in the room would have noticed. The correction factor assigned to the left navigation sensor had changed by only one symbol. A negative value had become positive. The number itself remained almost identical. Only its direction had changed. Maya quietly smiled. "There you are," she whispered. Victor immediately stepped closer. "That parameter cannot stop the demonstration." Maya looked at him calmly. "The parameter does not stop the demonstration. It convinces the navigation controller to correct itself in the wrong direction every time the robot begins moving." Owen rapidly compared the archive configuration with the active system. His breathing became noticeably quicker. "She is right," he said. "The controller keeps trying to cancel a correction that should never exist." Victor reached toward the console. "Do not change anything yet." Maya gently moved her hand away from the screen, respecting the request. "Then tell everyone here why the previous configuration worked yesterday morning." Victor remained silent. The ballroom seemed to grow even quieter. Grant slowly turned toward his engineering director. "Can you answer her question?" Victor opened his mouth, but no explanation came. The clock continued falling. 14, 13, 12. Maya looked back at Grant instead of Victor. "I only need one permission," she said. "Allow me to restore the original calibration value." Grant studied the robot, standing motionless beneath the brilliant white lights, then looked at the anxious faces of his engineering team. For years he had trusted titles, experience, and organizational charts. Tonight, none of those things had moved the machine even an inch. The only person offering a clear explanation was the woman wearing a black apron instead of an executive badge. Grant gave one slow nod. "You have permission," he said. Maya reached toward the highlighted value, changed a single symbol, verified the correction without hesitation, and moved her finger toward the confirmation button just as the countdown display reached 10 seconds, leaving the entire ballroom holding its breath while one small decision prepared to reveal whether wisdom had been hiding in plain sight all along. The instant Maya Reynolds pressed the confirmation button, the ballroom became completely still. 10 seconds remained on the countdown clock, yet nobody looked at the glowing numbers anymore. Every eye shifted to the silent robot standing beneath the bright white lights at the center of the stage. The updated calibration value appeared on the diagnostic screen, and for one long heartbeat, nothing happened. Grant Holloway remained motionless with his hands folded in front of him, resisting every instinct to ask whether the change had worked. Years of leading a global technology company had taught him that some of the most important decisions required patience, even when every second felt impossibly expensive. Victor Hale stared at the display with growing disbelief. He expected warning messages. He expected another system failure. He expected the robot to remain frozen and prove that Maya had simply been lucky with her observations. Instead, the navigation controller quietly completed a fresh synchronization cycle. Owen Price leaned closer to the monitor, reading each new status line as it appeared. "Primary navigation confirmed," he whispered. "Sensor alignment confirmed. Calibration accepted." The final line appeared at the bottom of the screen. "System ready." Maya stepped back without saying a word. She had done everything she intended to do. The machine would now speak for itself. Grant looked toward the event coordinator, who hesitated for only a moment before pressing the demonstration start command. For another 3 seconds, the robot remained perfectly still, and those 3 seconds felt longer than the previous 30. Somewhere near the back of the ballroom, a guest quietly exhaled. Another tightened both hands around a coffee cup without realizing it. Then the robot moved. Its electric motors responded with a smooth, controlled motion as it rolled forward across the demonstration platform without the slightest hesitation. It reached the first navigation marker exactly on schedule, adjusted its direction with remarkable precision, and continued through the program delivery route exactly as the engineering team had promised during months of preparation. It stopped at the final destination within less than half an inch of its intended position. The ballroom remained silent for another brief moment, not because people doubted what they had seen, but because they needed time to accept it. The machine had not simply started working again. It had performed more smoothly than it had during the final rehearsal recorded earlier that week. Owen quickly compared the live performance data with archived testing results. His eyes widened. The navigation efficiency increased by almost 4%, he said. It has never completed the course this accurately before. Several engineers immediately reviewed the numbers, and one after another they reached the same conclusion. The correction had not only removed the failure, it had restored the calibration that the robot was originally designed to use. Grant slowly turned toward Maya. The confident smile he had worn at the beginning of the evening was gone. In its place was the unmistakable expression of someone confronting an uncomfortable truth. He had spent years believing that expertise could always be recognized by titles, offices, and executive credentials. Tonight, a woman wearing a neatly tied black apron had solved in seconds what an entire engineering department had failed to identify for hours. Victor lowered his eyes toward the floor, saying nothing as the evidence unfolded around him. Reporters hurried to capture reactions instead of machines. Investors who had nearly walked away moments earlier began applauding one after another until the sound filled every corner of the ballroom. Grant did not join the applause immediately. He continued looking at Maya with quiet respect, realizing that the most valuable discovery of the evening was not the repaired robot standing on the stage before him. It was the extraordinary mind that had been serving coffee only minutes earlier, while an entire room had failed to recognize the brilliance standing quietly among them. The applause continued long after the robot completed its route, but Maya Reynolds did not raise her hands in celebration or acknowledge the cameras surrounding the stage. She quietly stepped away from the demonstration console and reached for the serving tray she had left behind, as though the extraordinary moment had changed nothing about who she was. That simple gesture captured Grant Holloway's attention more than the successful demonstration itself. Most people would have enjoyed the applause. Maya seemed interested only in returning the room to order. Grant watched her for a moment before speaking. "One question," he said, his voice no longer carrying the confidence that had challenged her only minutes earlier. "Where did you learn enough about autonomous navigation to recognize that problem almost instantly?" Maya looked at him calmly before answering. "I spent several years designing navigation reliability systems." The sentence was so ordinary that many guests assumed she was exaggerating. Victor Hale recovered enough composure to force a skeptical smile. "For whom?" he asked. Maya answered with the same quiet confidence she had shown all evening. "Northline Controls." The name spread through the ballroom like a sudden change in temperature. Owen Price looked toward one of the senior engineers, who immediately frowned as though trying to remember something important. Grant recognized the company at once. Apex Meridian had acquired Northline Controls 3 years earlier to strengthen its autonomous logistics platform. The acquisition had been considered one of the smartest strategic decisions in the company's history. Owen hurried toward a nearby workstation connected to the corporate archive. "Give me a minute," he said as his fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard. Several engineers gathered behind him while reporters continued recording every reaction. Maya remained perfectly still. She made no attempt to defend herself or convince anyone. Facts did not become stronger because someone repeated them louder. A few seconds later, Owen stopped typing. His expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief. I found the original engineering records, he said quietly. The large monitor beside the stage displayed archived project documentation from Northline Controls. Near the top of one technical report appeared a familiar name. Maya Reynolds, lead navigation reliability engineer. The ballroom fell silent once again. Grant looked from the screen to Maya and back again, reading the document twice before speaking. The report described a calibration method designed to prevent conflicting directional references inside autonomous navigation systems. It was not merely similar to the correction Maya had made. It explained the exact logic behind it. Owen continued opening additional archived files. Patent drafts, testing reports, reliability studies. Maya's name appeared again and again. These documents were created years before the acquisition, he said. The calibration process we are using today was originally developed by her team. Grant slowly removed his glasses and looked at Maya with genuine astonishment. You helped build the foundation of the system my company still depends on. Maya nodded once. A team built it. I was fortunate to be part of that team. She did not claim all the credit. She did not exaggerate her role. That quiet honesty made her words even more convincing. Victor remained unusually silent while engineers compared the archived records with the current software. One senior developer finally spoke. The correction she made tonight restored the original calibration logic described in these documents. Grant realized the evening had become something far greater than an impressive demonstration. It had revealed that the woman everyone had dismissed because of the apron she wore had already left her fingerprints on the very technology standing at the center of his company's future, and the room that had once measured people by appearance was now measuring itself against the undeniable evidence that true brilliance often arrives without asking anyone's permission to be recognized. The atmosphere inside the Langford Crown Ballroom had changed so completely that it was difficult to believe less than an hour had passed. The applause had faded, but respect lingered in every quiet conversation, every thoughtful glance, and every question now directed toward Maya Reynolds instead of the executives who had commanded the stage only moments earlier. Grant Holloway slowly walked to the center of the platform and looked out across the audience before turning back toward Maya. There was no trace of the confident smirk that had greeted her earlier that evening. Success had taught him how to lead companies, but nights like this reminded him that leadership was measured most honestly when someone discovered they had been wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, I owe all of you something far more valuable than an explanation. I owe you the truth. The ballroom became silent again. Grant looked directly at Maya before continuing. I judged someone by the uniform she was wearing instead of the knowledge she carried. That mistake belongs to me. The words were simple, yet they carried far greater weight than any carefully prepared corporate speech. Reporters lowered their cameras just enough to capture his expression instead of searching for dramatic reactions. Investors exchanged quiet nods. Authentic humility was far less common than technological innovation. Grant accepted the signed agreement from his legal counsel and placed it on the presentation table without hesitation. The $5 million will be transferred exactly as promised, he said. A commitment made in public should be honored in public. Maya thanked him with a polite nod, but did not reach for the document. The money matters, she answered calmly. Because promises should mean something. But there is something that matters more. Grant listened without interrupting. The engineers who built great ideas before acquisitions deserve to have their work remembered, Maya continued. Innovation does not begin on the day a larger company purchases it. It begins with people whose names are often forgotten. Those words settled over the ballroom with surprising force. Owen Price quietly opened several additional archived engineering records while other members of the technical team reviewed the acquisition history of Northline Controls. More documents confirmed the same pattern. Maya's work had remained inside the technology, even though few people inside Apex Meridian still recognized where many of the foundational ideas had originated. There was no evidence that anyone had intentionally erased her contributions, but years of corporate transitions, reorganizations, and leadership changes had slowly hidden the story behind the software. Grant understood that the company now had an opportunity to correct more than a single calibration value. It could correct its memory. He turned toward the company's general counsel. "Beginning tomorrow morning," he said, "I want a complete historical review of every engineering attribution connected to the Northline acquisition. Every contribution will be verified, documented, and credited accurately." No one objected. Even Victor Hale remained silent, his earlier certainty replaced by thoughtful reflection. The room no longer viewed Maya as someone who had interrupted an important event. She had become the reason the event would be remembered. Grant then faced her once again. "Tonight you repaired a machine," he said. Maya gently shook her head. "No," she replied with the same quiet confidence that had guided every decision she made throughout the evening. The machine was only showing everyone where people had stopped paying attention. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then the audience rose together in a standing ovation that felt different from the applause after the successful demonstration. This time, they were not celebrating technology. They were honoring integrity, humility, and the extraordinary reminder that genuine brilliance does not become greater because it is recognized by powerful people. It simply waits patiently until the truth gives it the chance to be seen. 3 months later, the headquarters of Apex Meridian looked different in ways that could not be measured by architecture or market value. The glass walls, polished floors, and state-of-the-art laboratories remained exactly where they had always been, yet something far more important had changed inside them. Engineering meetings now began with a simple question that Grant Holloway insisted every project leader answer before discussing deadlines or budgets. Whose idea made this possible? At first, the question surprised people. Eventually, it became part of the company's culture. Recognition was no longer reserved for the loudest voice in the room or the highest title on an organizational chart. It belonged to the people whose work created real progress. The historical review Grant had ordered uncovered dozens of engineers whose early contributions had quietly shaped technologies still generating billions of dollars in value. Their names were restored to company records, archived research papers were updated, and former team members received long overdue acknowledgement for the foundations they had helped build. Among those names, Maya Reynolds appeared exactly where it always should have been. She never asked for special treatment, public attention, or personal celebration. She only asked for the truth to be recorded accurately, because history written honestly becomes an opportunity for the next generation instead of a forgotten chapter. The $5 million payment arrived exactly as promised. News organizations across the country reported the remarkable story, but the headlines focused on the money while missing the lesson behind it. Maya quietly used part of the payment to provide the best medical care available for her mother, whose health had inspired many of the sacrifices that had changed the course of Maya's own career. Another portion established the Reynolds Innovation Fellowship, a program supporting talented engineers who had stepped away from their professions because family responsibilities had demanded more than ambition alone could provide. Grant personally attended the fellowship announcement, not as the keynote speaker, but as someone willing to listen. He understood that genuine leadership sometimes required stepping away from the microphone so that someone else's story could finally be heard. During the ceremony, he offered Maya a senior leadership position overseeing engineering reliability and technical integrity at Apex Meridian. Maya accepted, but only after one condition had been added to the agreement. Every engineer, regardless of title, background, or department, would be encouraged to challenge ideas whenever evidence supported a better solution. Grant signed the revised agreement without hesitation. He had learned that companies become stronger when respect flows in every direction instead of only from the top down. Months after the unforgettable evening at the Langford Crown Hotel, Visitors entering Apex Meridian noticed a framed photograph displayed in the Innovation Center. It did not show the repaired robot, the standing ovation, or the ceremonial check. It showed a woman wearing a simple black apron standing beside a silent machine, while an entire ballroom waited to discover whether courage could overcome assumption. Beneath the photograph, a single sentence appeared on a polished steel plaque. Great ideas do not announce themselves by appearance. They reveal themselves through truth. Employees passed those words every morning on their way to work, and many paused to read them even after seeing them countless times before. Some stories change a company. Others change the people inside it. On that remarkable evening, a billionaire believed he was testing a waitress with $5 million. In the end, life revealed something far more valuable. Money repaired a promise. Humility repaired a leader. Truth restored forgotten voices. And the greatest lesson was never hidden inside a machine at all. It had been standing quietly in the room from the very beginning, waiting for someone to look beyond the uniform and finally recognize the extraordinary person wearing it.